Well, hello again, folks. This is Lenny Lawson, the Car Guru, and I am feeling pretty fortunate today. Today is my mom's birthday. She passed away in 2021, and I was presented with a gift from her. Really, I was trying to continue her legacy. She was a lifetime teacher, even though she only taught in school for probably 20 years. She continued to do television teaching on educational TV up in West Virginia when we were up there, and then she continued that down here on Channel 2 for many years. But after that, she really got involved in the community in a really big way, especially here in Greenville and Greene County. She developed, with the help of another person, the Leadership Greene County program, and youth leadership was her own creation down here in Greenville through what they call the Greene County Partnership, but is a lot of communities call it the Chamber of Commerce. But I was able to go and do something that she would normally do, and that was speak to a group of young people. This today was at the Technological Center here, the Greene County Technology Center, I think is what it's called. But that's where kids go to learn technical skills, learn how to become a mechanic, learn how to become a caregiver. People can get nursing degrees and stuff like that. I went in last year and walked into this classroom, and in the middle of the class, this is a pretty large classroom, there was an airplane fuselage, an airplane. It didn't have wings on it, but it was a brand new airplane that was being assembled in this classroom. Thank goodness it had removable wings so that they could get it through the doors. But yeah, they actually built an airplane. How did they get an airplane? Well, a local benefactor, and boy, he's been a whopper of a benefactor to this community. His name's Scott Niswonger. And Scott bought him an airplane kit that they could assemble. And then once they got it assembled, right now it's going through flight testing, and then they can sell the airplane and keep the money for the tech center. But everything from CNC machines provided by Haas, HAAS, which is a technology and a tool maker, I believe. I don't know what all they're involved in. I know they have a Formula One race team, but you'll see their equipment in this place, teaching young kids how to program these machines so that they can make anything out of metal, basically. So I went down to speak to this group. I didn't know how big the group was going to be. It was actually ended up being a group of young men, boys, I guess you'd say. And we talked about a lot of different things. My point to them primarily was, I won't say primarily because I touched on a lot of subjects, but one of my main things was, what does your sign say? And this applies to just about everybody. What am I talking about? Well, my wife and I like to drive around. We like to get in my Porsche or in a 65 Corvair or an old Model A and just drive around. Look at stuff. Look at the mountains. Look at houses. One of the things that we notice a lot when we ride around in the county is we'll see houses that say, "No trespassing," has a sign in front of it. Or it'll say, "Beware of dog," or "Keep out." What does your sign say? The one that you wear on your chest, the one on your face. You see other houses and they say, "Welcome. Come on in." It's important that your sign says the right things. My sign says, "Welcome." My sign says, "Open for business. How can I help?" I'm not trying to be a martyr here, but sometimes we got the wrong signs out. We're putting out the wrong kind of vibes. You can feel it in a waiting room. You can feel it when you're waiting in line, for something, and you start to get impatient, or you see people that are getting impatient, and nobody's interacting. I think cell phones have done that to us. They've, maybe opened the world to us and put it in the palm of our hands, but they've shut down everything around us. And they don't I think they've destroyed the feeling of community. When you think of Facebook and Instagram and all these things, you think you're expanding community, but basically I don't think it does that at all. I think it centers people on the wrong things. Rather than being centered on their family, centered on the people that are around them, they're centered on others and many of them they don't even know. So I felt my mom's presence when I was sitting there talking to these kids. And I got excellent feedback. You can tell when you're talking. I don't care if you're talking to a customer out here on the car lot or somebody in service or a group of kids in a tech school. You can tell when they're paying attention, when you have their attention, when they're actually zeroed in on what you're saying. And they were. It's not always that way. I mean, I've actually gone to speak to a middle school class one time, and this girl laid her head down on the desk. I said, well, that's rude. This is what I was thinking. I walked over to the desk, and I tapped her on the shoulder, and I said, are you okay? Oh, yeah, I'm okay. Who does that? I mean, whose fault is it that she thinks that's okay? I know what her sign says. Do not disturb. So anyway, I think it's very important that we think about what our sign says and what kind of message are we sending to other people, by the look on our face, our countenance, the body language that we're exhibiting. It says something, and it may not say exactly what you intend for it to say. I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, I am back. We have been buying inventory, and you know why? It's because the more stuff that we buy and stock up on that has no tariffs on it, the better off we will be when the tariffs really hit. And as I said in the last program, it looks like May production of a lot of products are going to be affected by the tariffs. Now, if a vehicle is made, or let's say it's assembled in the United States, then the tariff impact won't be as great because only some of the components on the vehicle are going to be affected by the tariff. For example, if the engine is made in Canada, then the cost of that engine will be impacted by the tariff. If the rest of it is not, all of it's made in the United States, then there is no tariff. And so I guess that's the entire motivation of this, at least on the surface it seems that way. I don't think Donald Trump is purposefully trying to increase prices on Americans. That would be a terrible motive. I think what he's trying to do is to bring back manufacturing to the United States, which is a wonderful motive. Boy, the stock market has taken quite the ride. I was just looking at the ones that I'll pay attention to. Ford was up today 23 cents, GM 35 cents. Tesla, let's see what Tesla's doing. Tesla is down 18 cents. It's down to 241. If you look at Tesla and what has happened to them, let's look at 1 year. 1 year, Tesla has gone from, the high was $488 a share. The low was $138. There could have been some serious money made if you had gotten into Tesla before it had that big increase. But the thing is, Elon Musk and his activities have really hurt his company. It's really shifted people basically shifted political persuasions in terms of who his customers are. Now I actually talked to a guy the other day. He said, I'm going to buy a Tesla. I said, why? He said, political reasons. He would never buy a Tesla. He's a very conservative guy. He likes hot rods. He likes big block motors, big wheels and tires. Now he's going to buy a Tesla or lease a Tesla Model Y because the prices have really come down. And he says, I just want to support the man. And then you have the liberals, or the crazy liberals, not all liberals, but the crazy ones that are setting them on fire. California has been the biggest market for Tesla. The California New Car Dealers Association says that their market share fell to 43.9% in the first quarter of this year from 55.5% a year ago. Their registrations in the first quarter of 2025 fell over 15% from a year earlier, while registrations for all other EVs increased by 35%. So this has not been good for him or them or Tesla shareholders, whoever's involved. They're actually basically shutting down. They're not shutting down the lines. They're just drastically slowing down the lines and decreasing production on the Tesla truck. And that's understandable. I had one ordered. I built one. When they first announced it, I said, that is the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm going to order one. Doesn't that seem weird? Counterintuitive, yes. But I thought that it would be something that I could flip and make a lot of money on. So I was on the list, and I had really forgotten. It was like 2 years I get this notice, your truck is getting ready to be manufactured. How do you want it equipped? So I went in there and looked. The only model that they had available was the most expensive launch edition, which was like $105,000 or $106,000, something like that. The one I had originally spec'd out was $67,000. So I said, pass, hard pass. So what I did is just decided to sit back and watch. I canceled my order, or my reservation, I should say. And so I just wanted to see what happened. Well, when they first came out, they were flipping them on Bring a Trailer and making anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000. That would have been a good thing. Can't do that now. Nobody wants them. I mean, if you go to a Tesla store, you're going to see them parked all over the place. They are very hard to get rid of, and they're going to be a fire sale. I mean, they may be a pretty good bargain when it's all said and done. You might be able to buy one real cheaply. You just don't want to drive it anywhere because, well, you probably would be safe in Tennessee, in Alabama, in Georgia, unless you're around the Atlanta area. Stay away from metro areas. Definitely don't go north of the Mason-Dixon line or to California because you're liable to get it keyed or set on fire. You know, if I did have a Tesla, we were talking about signs. I'd put a sign on the dash saying, "Please don't set me on fire. I'm a liberal." That would be hard for me to write. It would also be a lie. But still, you've got to do what you got to do to protect your equipment. And I really didn't think that politics would have such a powerful impact on what people buy. But then I remember what happened in 2008 when General Motors went bankrupt. Remember that? And the Chrysler Corporation went bankrupt. And, well, in General Motors' case, the government bailed them out. And in Chrysler's case, let's see, was it Fiat at that time? Either Fiat or Mercedes. What was it? Fiat bailed. Yeah, it was Fiat bailed them out. Mercedes had purchased the Chrysler Corporation or controlling interest in it before and developed some really cool products, really good chassis under. You had a Mercedes chassis basically that was underneath a Dodge Charger. I bet that was insulting to Mercedes owners. You're out there in the parking lot, and the guy in your Mercedes 300, the guy pulls up in a Charger, says, "Hey, your car's built on the same chassis as mine." But yeah, a lot of people were really upset about General Motors getting bailed out by the government. And I felt the same way. I mean, all the Chevrolet dealers, for example, we were all under threat. I was a Chevy dealer at that time. We'd been a Chevy dealer for 36 years. My dad originally went to work for Chevrolet Motor Division in 1956, and we got a letter from GM saying, "We might be terminating your franchise, but we can't tell you yet. We have to wait and on this Obama administration to see what they tell us, how many dealers we have to cut." Well, finally we got a letter that said that we were saved, but I know a lot of dealers who weren't. And, their franchise was pulled. So imagine you've got millions of dollars invested in a building. It says Chevrolet on the front. 2 years before that, you did the Chevrolet face or facade upgrade, with the big blue tower in the front, and then on either side it's all this aluminum that wraps around the building. I mean, that was all something that I had to do. I mean, we'd spent, it was close to $2 million completely redoing our facility to meet the new General Motors or the Chevrolet standards. And then we get this letter saying, well, we might be closing you down. It's taking your franchise. That happened to a lot of people. That led to a lot of bankruptcy. Not just General Motors bankruptcy, but a lot of individual families bankruptcy. And plus, you had especially a lot of conservative people, a lot of that farmer types, and I don't mean to say farmer types, but just regular everyday citizens. They don't like the idea of the government bailing out a corporation. So you know what they did? They came knocking on my door as a Ford dealer. They said, we're going to buy a Ford. I've never bought a Ford before, but I'm not buying a General Motors vehicle. Well, over time, most feelings that people have, they kind of get smoothed over, and they just kind of forget it. But I'll tell you what, the bondholders, all the different companies and individuals that bought General Motors debt, basically loaned General Motors money, they all got scraped off. They can get a dime. Shareholders were able to exchange some of their stock for the new General Motors. The actual General Motors Corporation that exists today is not the same one that filed for bankruptcy. They let that thing run off and then started a new General Motors. So Chevrolet, all the different brands. Of course, a lot of the brands didn't survive. Hummer didn't survive. Pontiac didn't survive. Oldsmobile was already gone. Buick barely survived. They're still there. They're still there somewhere, selling Daewoo's rebadged as Buicks. Well, maybe Daewoo quit making the Buick. What was it? The Envision or something like that. The little squatty Buick. The only people you see driving that are older people. It was definitely not my granddaddy's Buick. He had what they lovingly referred to as a deuce and a quarter. That was a Electra 225. And then he graduated to the Park Avenue. Now, those were some names right there. I mean, I used to ride on the armrest of that 1967 Electra 225. No seat belt. You know what my seat belt was? My grandfather's right arm. If he had to slam on the brakes, here'd come that arm. That was my airbag and my seat belt. And it wasn't because he didn't love me. We just didn't think about things like that. Back in the 60s, 50s and 60s, race car drivers, they didn't wear seat belts. Why wear a seat belt? I mean, if you get in a really bad wreck, the thing's going to burst into flames. You'd rather burn up or take your chances flying through the air. And most of them said, I'll fly. And then they invented fuel cells and all kinds of a better safety equipment. And today, if a driver wrecks a Formula One car going 180 miles an hour, the chances of surviving it are excellent. I mean, it's very rare for a race car driver to die in a race car now. It happens. It happened to Dale Earnhardt. If you saw that accident, you wonder, well, how did that kill him? I've seen a lot worse accidents than that. Well, it just did because he refused to wear the Hans device, which would have prevented his head from going forward at the speed that it did, and the abrupt stopping of that vehicle against that wall, and that's what did him in. But my point about all this is, if we backtrack the tape, is that loyalty and the way people feel about a particular product can change over time. Something just out of the blue, something political, like somebody trying to cut expenses in the federal government, prompts people to, for some reason or other, set Teslas on fire. The government decides to intervene to save a company that needed to be saved. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not buying one of them anymore. But you wait a couple years and over time, they soften up and they say, okay, I like the new Silverado. I'll give it a try. And now we have a situation where the government is getting involved again and changing everybody's ideas about what they're going to buy, when they're going to buy it. Wouldn't it be nice if they just leave us alone and let the markets take care of themselves so that we can just sell cars and take care of our customers and live happily ever after. I'll be back in just 1 minute. So when the Democrats were in power, they're going to tell us that we're going to drive electric vehicles and we're going to like it. Only problem with that was we refused. We're not going to buy those things. I mean, maybe eventually we will, but you're not going to make us buy them. And obviously it was a bad decision because they had to pay $7,500 out of the deficit, to get you to buy one. And you still didn't want to buy them. And then they said they're going to build chargers all across the country. All these billions and billions of dollars. And they build 8 of them or 4 of them. And we're not buying them. And then finally, when people aren't buying them and they pull the plug on the tax credit, then the manufacturers start dropping the prices. And guess what happens? People start buying them. EV sales are up. People are actually buying. Manufacturers are trying to figure out ways to make the batteries cheaper, to make them last longer. If they'll just leave free enterprise alone, capitalism works. It's a self-refining process. It's not mandated by somebody, some bureaucrat. It just happens. If you make good products, you price them fairly, people will buy them. If you tell me you have to buy this, I'm going to revolt because I'm an American. Now, if I live in China, I may not have a choice. If I live in Russia, same thing. But I don't live there. I live in America, and I'm glad. And in my opinion, we're going to figure this out. We're going to solve these problems. And when we do, we'll all be better off if the politicians leave us alone. Well, thanks for listening to this kind of a whiny but ultimately uplifting edition of My Car Guru. Give me a call or a text if you want to, 423-552-2020. I got a bunch of good calls and texts yesterday, and it was my pleasure to help those people figure out what their cars are worth, all of them. That's what it involved. What should I do? Should I trade? Should I keep? Should I wait for the tariffs to kick in? Will my used car be worth more because of tariffs? The answer to that question is probably will. That would be a good thing. All right, call me, 423-552-2020, or send me an email to LennyLawson2020@gmail.com, and I'll see you next time.